Welcome back to the podcast. We are going to do a debt deep dive today because we have been working with a lot of debt lately, working with doing custom debt plans for you. And we're seeing a lot of the patterns that are kind of universal when someone has debt, or especially when someone has a lot of debt in a lot of places, like having multiple cards, multiple loans, and sort of some of the patterns that come up that got you to that place in the first place that we want to talk about today to help you either stay out of debt or make a plan for you to get a handle on it, so that you don't have to carry it with you for years and years. One of the things, Becca, I want to start with is, what do we teach and preach and believe when it comes to keeping your money simple and easy to organize, to stay on top of?
If you have a business, this also applies to your business. You have one account with a debit card and you have one credit card. And that is it. Yes, I know there can be some, if you don't have your money together with your husband or whatever, maybe you each have a checking account and one credit card together. But we see all the time how tricky and confusing and frustrating and forgetful you can become when you have multiple credit cards with multiple due dates, like they're spread all through the month, right? Then some of your stuff is coming out of your checking account, but then, like, do you have enough in your checking account to pay off the credit cards that you've it's just this weird game of like transferring money back and forth to the credit card, to the checking account. Do you have enough? You don't know if you have enough because it's all coming from different areas, and it's so confusing and frustrating. And then you just like decide you're bad with money. That's typically what happens, and you're like, all right, well, I'm just not going to look at it anymore. Like, it's always worked out, so we're not going to look at it anymore.
Yeah. And I think what we've seen a lot of is, you know, seeing late fees, interest on cards, where because it comes out automatically, you don't even know that it's coming out, and you don't realize how much money per month is going to just payments on these cards. So more expenses on your expense sheet that you don't even realize is going out because it's just getting added to that balance. And it can be quite alarming when we frame that out for someone and say, hey, did you know you're paying, this much a month in late fees and this much a month in interest because you've got a lot of moving parts. It's like, wow, I had no idea. That is the kind of awareness that puts you back in the driver's seat to feel really empowered to getting a handle of it. We want to talk a little bit today. I'm going to just kind of outline a few things that we're going to cover in today's episode. And then we're going to tell you a little research, what is it, detective work Becca did over the last year, in reference to the credit card points game that a lot of people play, using cards to earn points for travel. So we're going to talk about consolidating debt and whether it's good or bad. So that was a question that came in recently. We're going to talk about 4 ways to decide how to tackle your debt if you do have some. There's a lot of talk about whether the snowball method is the best or the avalanche method is the best. We're going to define what those mean if you have no idea. And we're going to share with you the 4 ways that we help you make a decision on what's the best method for you. And I think that's it. There's probably going to be a bunch of other stuff that we bring up. So let's start with credit cards and the points game. Becca, do you want to share a little bit about just what that means for someone who's like, what's the points game? And then tell us a little bit about the detective work that you did this year.
What's interesting about the story that I'm going to tell is Marley does not understand this at all, because in Canada, they don't get 10 or 15 credit card like mailers every single day. I forgot to tell you, Saturday we checked the mail and I'm at the trash can, like throwing junk mail away. Eight credit card offers in one day of mail. 8 of them, right?
That's
So, like,
insane to me. We get like, the only one I've ever seen is Capital One. Like, I'm in Canada. I don't know if you just mentioned that. Capital One credit card, maybe once a year in the mail. Like, that's it. So I don't know if it's like a regulations thing or we just have less. I don't know what the difference is, but like my mind was blown when you said you get 8 in the mail at one time. So it's like, it's just sad to me. Like, it's so, because I can see how tempting it would be when you're in a pinch or something's feeling tight, and if you have it just there at your disposal to open up, activate, and swipe. I mean, it's
Oh,
not your
0%
fault.
interest? 0% interest for 12 months? I'll have this paid off at the end of 12 months.
Right. And like
Will
those are
you?
great. Like we love those for some people to use as a tool. So they're not a bad thing, but they are a tempting thing,
Mhm.
and they're designed to sort of trick you into saying yes. And then if you don't have the tools, the habits, the skills to make the most out of that 0% interest time period, or just to make the use out of having a credit card,
Mhm.
like it's not your fault if you're in debt. It's not your
Yeah.
fault if you have a bunch of credit cards and you've gotten down the slippery slope of debt on credit cards. So like that's what this episode is about. Like, first of all, releasing any shame you're feeling if you have some debt, and let's figure out a plan for you to get out of it, because you are where you are. Like, tough mama mar love coming out. Like, you are where you are. It is what it is. I've been in debt. Becca's been in debt, where we both had to have like a real talk with ourselves to go, okay, so what are we going to do about it? Like we always say. And sometimes, like in my circumstance, it was asking my mom, hey, mom, I'm really embarrassed to say this. I'm really embarrassed to come to you right now. I just addressed the elephant in the room. I was like, I've got some debt, and I'm wondering if there's some way that you can help me figure out a plan to get out of it.
Mhm.
I didn't know if she could loan me money. I didn't know if she could help me consolidate. I didn't know what the options were, but I knew she knew more than me. And it was a really uncomfortable conversation, but it was the reason that I was able to get out of debt.
Yep. And I've
So,
done both. My parents have helped me pay off debt and I've paid them back. And I've consolidated things to pay things back. Like I've done both of those things. I
yes,
know it's really hard to dig yourself out of debt when you're doing it on your own. And I also know it's possible.
yes,
The only way that it's possible though is if you are paying attention to your money and you're paying attention to how much you're spending on these credit cards every month and like how far you're actually getting ahead. I want to tell them about my experiment from the
yes,
last 12 months. So, in 2023, it was March of 2023 because I remember it was around my birthday. And there's this account on Instagram that's like, never pay for travel again. We're going to help you travel hack and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I followed them for a while. And then in March, I was like, I'm going to try this and I'm going to see what actually happens. I'm going to see if I'm not a giant account helping people open a credit card with my referral link, if this is actually possible to travel for free for the rest of my life. So in March of 2023, I opened up the Chase Sapphire card. And the promotion that they typically have is if in the first 30, 60, 90 days you spend $4,000 on that card, they will give you 60,000 points. 60,000 points amounts to $600. Okay. And then their thing is if you transfer the points to their travel site, then I think you get 20% more points, which is still not a lot, right? Not a lot. Um anyway, so in the first 35, 45 days, we hit that $4,000 mark because we were putting all of our household expenses on that card and paying it off every month as if it were a debit card, right? I got my 60,000 points and then I used that card for all of our expenses for the entire rest of the year. I also want a disclaimer. We had several things that had to happen. We put a down payment on a car on that credit card, knowing we could pull the cash out and pay that off right away, right? But I was like, I want to see if it affects the points. Like, I'm gonna see how many points I can physically accrue in 12 months with that huge $60,000 like dump at the beginning. You guys, over the next 10 months, I spent and I spent and I spent and I spent on that credit card. We have one credit card. When my husband needed it, I would hand it to him and he would go spend on it, right? One credit card for 12 months. At the end of 12 months, I only had 70,000 points. So in the rest 10 months of the year, I only accrued 10,000 points, which is $100, you guys. $100. I could make $100 today selling some of my kids' toys that they don't play with. I could make $100 today, I don't know, offering to help somebody move or anything. Literally, I could make $100 in the next 5 minutes if I wanted to. It would not take me 10 months to make that. And so, what I want you guys to know is I spent a lot of money on that credit card and I paid every dollar of that money off every single month because I knew exactly how much I had to spend when I was swiping it. But the problem is most of us do not know how much we can actually afford to pay off at the end of the month. So these credit card companies know that, and they're tempting you with points. I have $800 to book a travel today. P.S. Travel costs a lot more than $800. I'm just going to say right now, like, where can I go for $800? Not many places, right? So I just want you to I want you to see the big picture. 12 months of a lot of spending only got me a grand total of $700. $700.
$58 a month in savings.
$58 a month. Do you know what got me a lot more than $5,800 a month? All of the money that's sitting in my high yield savings account. I'm making like $100 a month on that, and I'm not having to do anything. It's just sitting there. I'm not having to spend money and hope to God that I didn't spend more than I can actually afford to pay off.
And there's no risk on that money.
There's no risk on that money. And like it becomes, I'm not gonna lie, I got caught up in the spending game this year because it was like, oh, but like points. Mondo, put the gas on this card because we can get points. And then
That's what they want.
That's what they want. And at the end of the month or at the end of the year, I was like, $700? All of that work, all of that, like getting caught up in the let's put all of Christmas on this credit card so we can get the points.
So the credit card, this is the thing about credit cards. They are a company designed to profit. So remembering that when you open up a new card, this is a company designed to profit off of my lack of money management skills.
Right.
And I want to
count on that. They count on you not knowing how to manage your money.
Right. Because that's literally how they make their money. That's why there's so many offers out there to get free credit cards. I want to be the devil's advocate because there are a lot of people who play the points game, and there are a lot of people who do travel hack their lives with credit cards. Of course, just like there's a lot of people who win the lottery. There's a lot of people who do all these things you see popping up on your social media, like this way to make a side hustle, and this way. Like, yes, they all work, but they work with work. So like if you want to play the points game and be the 1 in a million person who gets the zillions of points and never pays for another flight again, you're going to have to literally take it on like a part-time job and learn a lot of like the hacks and this website. And like, it's not as simple as just get the card. And that's what most people are doing. They're just getting the card and then putting everything they can on the card to get the points. So like, unless you have part-time job hours to put towards this points game, and even then it's not a guarantee. It's just a way for the credit card companies to make money off of you. So what we're saying is, for the average person who's going to use the credit card in the most common way, it's not worth $58 a month when you could literally find that in your budget and save it, and more probably.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, definitely for those of you listening, like you make good money, right? So that, I love that you did that. You didn't even tell me you were doing that. I think you told me you did, actually, like right at the beginning you told me, but then we just didn't talk about it all year long. And just actually this morning, Becca's like, I want to talk about this on the podcast. And I love it. So thank you for doing the market research and
for not carrying a balance on that card.
Not carrying a balance and staying out of debt. I love it. But the next thing I think that this goes into is this conversation around, there's a couple things. Do you want to talk about consolidating next, or do you want to talk about the methods to pay off debt? I mean, they kind of go hand in hand. Let's talk about the methods.
Yeah.
Because consolidating is a method. So tell us the snowball, the avalanche.
Okay.
The consolidation.
Snowball method is very popular. If you follow Dave Ramsey, they do snowball method, right? So snowball method is when you list out all of the debts that you owe and you start paying them off by the smallest balance. So the smallest balance all the way down to the largest balance, right? That's how you pay them.
And why?
You do not care about interest rates. You do not care about minimum payments. You don't care about anything. It's so you can get quick wins right off the bat, because typically you probably have a debt that's like $200 and they're like, pay it off and like move on. And so let's say that $200 debt had a $50 payment every month. Now you take that $50 you were paying towards $200 and you move it and add it to the next debt's minimum payment. So let's say you were paying $100 on the second debt. Now you've added your first debt's $50 payment. Now you're paying $150 towards the second debt. And you snowball the amount that you're paying as you
I like that. If I was to have to pick one, because to me, I like the idea of having less debts, not less of a balance. But if I have 5 debts, I want to have 4, and then I want to have 3.
Right.
Ignoring the total balance, because for my peace of mind, that feels better to me.
And it's easy to get started because you don't have to go research how much interest you have. Credit card companies don't want you to know how much interest you're paying. So they bury it in the terms and conditions. They bury it in the policies and procedures. And typically you can find it on the back of your credit card statement, but they don't want you to find it because they don't want you to be like, "Oh my God, I'm paying 30% interest on this credit card." They just want you to pay it. So snowball method is you're only looking at balances. You pay the smallest first and you work your way all the way down to the largest balance, right? It can take a long time. It can go fast depending on how much you're paying. It depends on the debt. The avalanche method is the opposite. You list out all of your debts and you start with the highest interest rate. You pay off the card with the highest interest rate and you work your way down to the debt with the lowest interest rate, okay? So the goal of this is to pay the least amount of interest possible. Okay? So it depends on how your brain works. It depends on how comfortable you are with money. It depends on how well you understand money, how well you understand interest rates, all of those things, right? Marley and I have a totally different system that we use. It's kind of like a combination of those two. The first thing that we're always going to ask you, and I want you to answer this question for yourself today, which one is stressing you out? When you wake up in the morning, which debt is the first one that you're like, "Oh my God, I cannot believe I still have that. I can't believe I maxed out that card," or whatever. Which one is the one that like you can't stop thinking about? That's the one that we're typically going to help you tackle first, okay? Because we want that kind of like the snowball method wants you to have a quick win. We actually want to reduce your stress the fastest. That's what we want for you. Because when you don't have as much stress, then you can make really clear and sound decisions with your money. Then we're going to ask you all of your minimum payments, your balances, your interest rates, and your credit limit on those individual loans or credit cards. What we do is we go through and we estimate how much, depending on what your payment is and how much you could pay. We go through and estimate how much interest you're going to pay on that card over the length of the loan. And then we did and let's say you tell us you have $1,000 a month to pay towards debt. We're going to take that amount of money that you say you have to pay towards debt, and we're going to work through all of those numbers and all of these payments and tell you how you're going to get there the fastest, paying the least amount of interest. And here's where it gets really tricky. The avalanche method actually doesn't, in some cases, help you pay less interest. And we figured that out. We didn't figure this out. We saw a prime example of this past week. We were working on a custom debt plan, and there were 2 debts that were really stressing her out. One of them was a large minimum payment, a large balance, and a very high interest rate, like really close to 30%. And then the second one that was stressing her was like $115 monthly payment, minimum payment, a lower balance, and a much lower interest rate. And so if you're just looking at those without actually doing any of the finagling that we do, you would think, "Oh, she definitely needs to hit that card that has a higher balance, higher interest rate," right? She needs to get rid of that fast. In reality, what we found was if she rode the length of that second loan out, lower minimum payment, lower balance, lower interest rate. If she rode that out, she was going to pay double the amount that was the balance. So the balance, let's just say, call it $5,000. She was going to pay $5,000 in interest. So she was going to end up paying $10,000 on that credit card at the end of that, because it looks like, oh, it's $115 minimum payment. It's so simple. Like, that's only $115. I'm just going to ride that out. There's not a
Take
high
care of the
interest
bigger
rate.
debt.
take care of the bigger debt. That's actually not what we're recommending, because she's going to pay so much more interest on that smaller debt because she's paying so much less over a really long length of time. It's
And not
crazy.
all minimum payments are created equal. So they're not this, like, comparing the minimum payment on one card is not the same as on another card. There's a lot of moving parts to that data. And that's why you need a plan for your debt, because you need to know the data that you're working with.
Yeah.
So out of the 4 ways that we help you come up with a plan to pay off debt, Becca mentioned stress. What's stressing you out? The second thing we consider is the data. So like, what are your interest rates? What are your minimum payments? What is the balance? Like what is the data that you're working with? Then there's 2 more ways. The next is your goals. So like, what is important to you right now? What are you working towards? Not just in terms of your debt, but also what are you saving for? What do you want to do more of with your money? So we want to know, what is your goal? What's important to you? And the 4th step is to know how much money you have to put towards debt every month. So we need to know, what are we working with that we can plug towards this? How fast do you want to get out of debt? The more money you have to throw at debt, the faster you can get out of it, the less interest you're going to pay. But if you also have some goals to live your life while you're getting out of debt, then that's something that's important that we need to know when we're working on a custom plan for you. Because Becca, you are a prime example of being able to pay off $90,000 of debt, and you went on trips with your husband, you had babies, like you were able to save and spend while getting out of all that debt on a really low income at the time.
North Carolina teacher salary, look it up. But it didn't start that way. What it started as me taking every single penny that ever came in this house and throwing it at debt, which felt really good at the time. And then inevitably, I would pay, using the snowball method, I would pay a debt off. I would get, like, let's just say someone, teachers don't get bonuses. So Mondo would get a bonus from work. Let's say it was $500. And I would be like, oh, we have a debt that's $500. I'm going to pay it off and we'll move to the next one. What happened every single time? I would take that $500, pay it off. Something would happen to the car or the house, or a medical bill would come in. And I would be like, I wish I had that $500, because now I have to put this back on a credit card, back on debt. So it was like this, you get 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. And it was this, it was a mind game is what it was. And it was so bad for my mental health, and honestly for our marriage. That's why we changed things. And that's why we decided we're going to tiptoe out of debt instead of like sprinting. And we're actually going to enjoy each other's company and go out to eat and go on vacation and have 2 babies that cost $5,000 a piece to go to the hospital. Like,
right.
I always say that I had to pay $5,000 to have babies, but like we wanted to live life. We were 30 when we got married. So like, we weren't in our 20s, and we had, like, you know, all this time to relax and have fun, and then decide to have babies. Like, it was kind of like, do you want them, or do you want to be 50 when you have babies? So I learned very quickly that the snowball method did not work for our family and our goals. Our goal is not to get out of debt when we're in our 50s. Our goal was to get out of debt early, but also like living and like being able to say yes a lot more to things that were aligned with our goals. And so the avalanche method didn't even work for us. For us, it was the combination. And I think that's where this came from. This was like the original, you know, molding of the different types of paying off of debt. And then there was a time where we just had to consolidate. It was like, okay, well, based on our goals now, and based on the money we have available now, and the amount of mouths we have to feed in this house now, what is an easier and faster and less stressful way for us to pay this off? Debt consolidation. Right. So we consolidated debt. And the only reason that worked for us, though, is because we knew how much we could afford, and we didn't go back to using those credit cards that we had just consolidated. Yeah.
Right. So the question we were asked was, is it good or bad, essentially? Is it good or bad to consolidate debt? And I think the answer, I want you to share the answer you gave to this person, was really helpful, because it sounds like a no-brainer, of course, to just, of course, consolidate. Less interest, get a 0% interest credit card. I mean, amazing. Yes, please. 12 months of no interest, 6 months, 8 months. Like, of course, it's like a no-brainer question. But I think the questions that you posed to her and the way that you framed it was important for a couple of reasons, and I'll share them and then I'll let you tell what you actually said. But it's like there's so much more to consider than just the interest, because if you're just going to use the cards again, like pay them off and then start using them again and not change your habits, then consolidating isn't going to help you.
Yep.
So like it's a bigger conversation of how do I handle the debt, because it's actually a question of like, how are you going to handle you?
Yeah.
How are you going to change your behavior that got
and
you
your
into this place?
emotions
Your
around all of it.
emotions, how you
Mhm.
feel about how other people feel about you, because a lot of our spending is to keep up with the Joneses. A lot of us are not just house poor, but car poor. A lot
Yeah.
of us are just living outside of our means, and we're so in the habit of it that that's how we got here. And you're just going to get back there with more debt in the end, because you've consolidated. Now you got this big one. You've got all these freed up credit cards. What's going to happen with those when you see the 0% or zero
Yeah.
balance? So tell us, what did you say to this client? How did you frame it?
So I basically what I said was I have a couple questions for you before I answer your question. And those questions are, do you feel disciplined and responsible enough to not use those credit cards after you consolidate? And her answer was, I think I do. I think I'm at a point where like I'm sick of living like this. I'm sick of feeling like this. And I said, okay, well, what are you going to do with those credit cards then? Like, how are you going to remove them from being a possibility? And it doesn't necessarily have to be cut them up, right? Like, I put mine away. Like, we have a safe, and sometimes I just go put credit cards in a safe. And I'm like, it feels like a lot of work to walk back there and open the safe and rifle through and find the number. Like, I'm just not going to do it. So I asked her all of these questions, and she was like, honestly, I feel like I'm gonna be responsible and disciplined enough because I feel like I'm at a point where I cannot live like this any longer, and I really wanna get out of debt, and I don't see how it's possible without consolidating. And I said, "Okay, then I would say that you are a good candidate for consolidation, and we need to put some safety nets in place for you because you're gonna have a bad day one day, you're gonna have a good day one day, and you're gonna wanna spend money because of those feelings. And if it's not aligned with any of the goals that you have for yourself or your family or your business, in her case, then you're just gonna fall right back into old patterns." And I know this client specifically got into credit card debt just not paying attention and just like living life and like really loving to spend money. And I know a lot of us got into debt that way. I know
And
that's how I got
making
into
good money.
making really good money and still like one of the cards she was talking about was 0% interest for I think 12 months to begin with. And at that 12-month mark, it wasn't paid off. So they added like a crap ton of interest to it. And now there's interest building every month. It's just this whole black hole that you can get yourself into, and they make it intentionally very difficult to get out of because
Yeah.
at some point you're just going to be like, whatever, I'm just going to pay the minimum payment until I die. And it is what it is. We don't want you to say it is what it is. We want you to be like, okay, I'm taking control of this today, and I'm changing my habits today because I don't like where my habits have gotten me. I don't like where I see them taking me.
I want to share like a really silly little realization I had recently, but it feels really big because it's a big mind shift. So, and I think probably I hope everyone can relate to this. I am someone who's like, and I remember you, Becca, in the beginning be like, that's $10 a month. And I'd be like, yes, 10 bucks a month. You're saying dollars, I'm saying bucks. It's $10 a month, Marley. I'm like, yeah, it's 10 bucks a month. Like, just do it. And there was all these things that pop up. My husband and I were just looking at a security system for our home. And he's like, oh yeah, you can get this set up and it's just $5 a month. And I literally, this was this weekend. In my heart, I was like, that's $5 a month. That's like, oh gosh, don't make me do the math right now. But like, let's say that's $100 a year. That is, that's money I could put towards our investments. Like, I just instantly was like, that's $100. In my head, I saw it as like what it really is. And I was like,
Mhm.
and not a year, because that's for life. Like, you're gonna have to pay for this subscription to this service forever. That never goes away. So all I could think about was like, I would like to do so much more with that money. I mean, we still might do it because there might not be a better option, but we're researching. And it was just the fact that I had this like total shift in like, that's not $5. That's not $5 a month. That's $5 a month.
Right. Right. Like picture the
There's a
individual dollars
different
in your head.
definition. $5
Yeah.
is like money you found in your pocket. $5 is money I worked hard to earn, and I have choices of what I want to do with it to make the most out of it. Like
Yeah.
there's a definition difference between bucks and dollars, and
Yeah.
we're gonna have
Well,
to find
listen,
that.
as you know, growing up in math, they're like opportunity cost. And I'm like, what the crap is opportunity cost anyway? Like, it didn't ever make sense to me until I started managing my own money in a really smart way. And I'm like, $10. Oh, do I want to spend $37 at McDonald's tonight for the kids? No, I do not. $37 is a lot of money that I actually would prefer to use here. So when Marley and I talk about that's $5 a month, we're not being frugal, we're not being restrictive. We're like, I don't want them to have that $5. I would rather use that here where
Yeah.
I actually am excited that that money could be used here, even if it's to pay off debt. Like, even if it's $5 a month to pay off debt, we were talking this morning about how paying just $50 extra towards debt can cut your interest in half. In half. And sometimes it's a lot more than that. So, what we want you to know is we have credit cards. We use credit cards. We pay them off every month. I actually do have some credit cards that are holding a balance right now. They're 0% interest, and you better believe that the date that I have to pay them off is on my calendar so that I don't get hit with all that interest. Like, do we use these? Yes.
Do we
Because we
use
understand
debt sometimes? Yeah.
we use debt sometimes to get ahead, but it's not in a hope and pray kind of way. We're not swiping the card and hoping that we're making enough money to pay that off. Every time that we make a decision to go into debt, either it's credit cards or a
Not
personal
consumer
loan,
debt, investment debt.
investment debt, right? It is calculated. Before that card is used, we sit down and we look at, okay, how much money do I actually have every month to pay towards this? Is that going to be enough to pay that off by the 0% interest date? No. Well, then we can't use this card then, because that's one of our goals is to get ahead as quickly as possible, because I'm 39, you guys. Like, I don't want to, I mean, this is not true, but like half my life is gone. It's not true, I know, but like I don't have time to waste on like in and out of credit card debt, in and out of credit card debt. Oh my God, I maxed this one out. Now how am I going to pay it off? Because every time I'm stressed about paying off a debt, I have lost sight of the goal that I actually have, which is to have enough money to not worry about making payments, to not worry about do we have what we need plus the things that we want. Like, I want to make sure that we have everything we need and want today, and that our future selves, 20, 30, 40 years from now, have everything that we need and want. And concentrating on paying off credit card debt is not in that plan. Like, that takes me away from the goal.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really, like we said, it's a debt deep dive today. This is why we are offering debt plans. This is why they're only $97. We want them to be affordable. We want you to make a plan. We want you to get out of debt. Like, this is our gift to you. If you feel like you need somebody else's eyes on your situation to help you come up with a plan based on your goals, your numbers, what's stressing you out, and how much you actually have to put towards it, to create an actual custom plan and not a cookie cutter, snowball method or avalanche method, but something that's going to make sense and feel good and be sustainable so that you'll stay accountable to your goal. You can reach out to us on Instagram. We'll put our Instagram below this episode. And we can talk and see if it would be a good fit for you. So debt is not your fault. You just need some skills and tools. We have all been in debt, I believe. And getting out of debt is possible, and it doesn't have to take years and years and years. You just need a clear plan so that you can just start racing towards it and stop making so many decisions on what you're going to do with your money every single month. This can be a lot easier than it feels. So thank you for listening to this episode, and we will see you in the next one.